But first, I want to set the stage for what we know right now. The stakes in Argentina are huge. President Trump's meeting with Xi Jinping tomorrow could be key to the stock market soaring or tanking for the rest of the year. So any distractions could be a problem. And boy, does the president have a big one right this moment. We know that yesterday, his longtime attorney and fixer, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty to lying to Congress. He specifically lied about the president's repeated attempts to secure a real estate deal in Moscow, now admitting he talked to the president and his family members multiple times about this thing. In response, the president and his allies launched a multi-pronged attempt to push back. Step one, go after Michael Cohen.
He's a weak person and not a very smart person. So very simply, Michael Cohen is lying, and he's trying to get a reduced sentence for things that have nothing to do with me.
Trouble with that, Rudy Giuliani says that Trump's written answers to Mueller's questions about the Moscow project match Cohen's version of the events. So if Cohen is lying, then isn't Trump lying too? Step two, admit there was a Russia project in the works, then try to convince everyone that it was common knowledge.
Everybody knew about it. It was written about in newspapers. It was a well-known project. I didn't do the project. I decided not to do the project, so I didn't do it. So we're not talking about doing a project. We're talking about not doing a project.
Looking back, there were some vague public references to the president's desire to possibly build a Trump Tower in Moscow during the campaign. But to argue that everyone knew about it, well, that seems to be untrue. And step three, insist that none of this is a big deal because it was all legal. Trump said Thursday he was allowed to do whatever he wanted during the campaign. And this morning he tweeted another version of that argument, saying, quote, "Oh, I get it. I'm a very good developer, happily living my life. When I see our country going in the wrong direction, to put it mildly, against all odds, I decide to run for president and continue to run my business, very legal and very cool. Talk about it on a campaign trail. I lightly looked at doing a building somewhere in Russia, put up zero money, zero guarantees, and didn't do the project. Witch hunt." Giuliani also downplayed the significance of the Russia project on Thursday, telling the Washington Post, quote, "The president, as far as he knows, he remembers there was such a proposal for a hotel. He talked it over with Cohen. As Cohen said, there was a non-binding letter of intent that was sent. As far as he knows, it never came to fruition. That was kind of the end of it." The idea that Russia was just an idea, or that Trump was only mildly interested in the project, well, that is not true, also known as a lie. Today, the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post published a timeline showing that Trump's attempts to spread his brand in Russia goes back more than 30 years. I'm talking back in the late 1980s. Now, we got to make it clear. There's no suggestion that Cohen's lies somehow prove that the president conspired with Russia. But if none of this was a big deal, why did he keep it quiet? Why is the story changing now? Why did Cohen himself tell two, not one, two congressional committees that the Moscow project ended in January 2016 when that was a lie? It actually ended in June 2016. Court documents show he now claims that he lied to be consistent with the president's political messaging. So what was happening politically between January 2016 and June 2016? Please pay attention. This is important. We know the president was publicly denying that he had any financial dealings with Russia. He did it multiple times at rallies and TV interviews. But he was also saying this.
You want to make a good deal for the country. You want to deal with Russia. And there's nothing wrong with not fighting everybody, having Russia where we have a good relationship as opposed to all the stupidity that's taken place. Putin says very nice things about me. I think that's very nice. It has no effect on me other than I think it's very nice. If we can get along with Russia, that's very good. I know Russia well. They want to be friendly with the United States. Wouldn't it be nice if we actually got along with somebody?
It has no effect on you? There is a reason why political candidates typically reveal their tax returns and opt for complete transparency. It is so the American people know they are not under any undue influence of a company or a country. The fact that Trump was pursuing a real estate project in Russia while denying it to the public and publicly calling for warmer relations with Russia, and remember, We had massive sanctions on Russia because of the annexation of Crimea that was crippling their economy. So the fact that President Trump was so warm on Russia while talking about a business deal obviously raises questions about a conflict of interest. It is not clear how any of this would have impacted Trump's campaign, but there's one thing for sure. In February of 2016, the Republican primaries got underway. Trump was one of a ton of Republican candidates. By May, he had knocked out every single one and become the presumptive nominee. And in all that time, the president never told the public about any of this.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.